In this video guide, we will see how we can import a CAD file inside 3ds Max and then export it ready for my AR Studio to visualize it using augmented reality. So we're going to start in Max. We're going to go to File, Import, and we're going to start with a CAD file. So you should have a CAD file available for this. We also have other options to merge other 3ds Max files or to link other Autodesk products, but we're going to go for the import. Here we can search for our file in our system. So I'm going to go and select my file. And this is a CAD file STP format. You can also check all the formats that you can use for this. So you can import in many different ways. Once you're ready, you click on open, and you have some options here. So the first thing is that we can see that we are importing a STP. So this is the importer, and we can convert to mesh or not. So we have an initial option. Now, probably we will need to convert to mesh because we need polygons, and we can define the mesh resolution, meaning how many polygons we want. So the more polygons, the more quality, but also the more heaviness we will get. Be careful not to increase the number of polygons more than 100,000, and be careful for the file size not to be more than 5 megabytes. That depends also on the size of the textures that we're going to use in the materials. So we need to run some tests with this. You can continue and make your experiments. In my case, I'm going to choose just one as the mesh resolution, and also we will need to address the up axis. We can check that again later if everything goes well. Usually the up axis is on the Z, so Z up, but if that doesn't go well, we need to change it. Some applications use the Z as the depth and not as the height, so not always we will find the object oriented in the correct way. And then we have here the possibility to change and use the hierarchy as groups or as layers, and also other options that for now we can just skip. We don't need cameras, we don't need dummies, so let's go and import. And let's see what's going to happen. So you can see we see this CAD object, and it's a product design object, and right now it's not oriented correctly. It's flat on the ground. Instead we want it oriented up. So we need to change the Z-axis next time. And what about the mesh and the polygons? Let's go up here and change the visualization. Let's activate the edged faces, and now we can see that this mesh is composed by triangles, and it's looking pretty good. So the important thing is that we don't have too many or too little. And we can see that on the curvy areas, usually we have more subdivisions and more segments and more polygons because we need those to be nice and soft and curvy. We don't want to see the edges too much, but also we don't want to increase the number of polygons too much. So we need to keep an eye on the mesh resolution, which is basically the number of polygons. On the left here, we can investigate our model. So we can see that this is a group, and inside we have another group, and then inside that group we have all the little pieces divided. So we have basically a set of objects that are composing our main object. So we have different objects all together, but not merged together, just grouped together, and we can work with each one of them. So if I go here on the view and click on the plus sign, go to configure viewports, I'm going to activate the statistics so that we can check the number of polygons, and we can activate it on the active view, which is this 3D view right now. So up there on the left side, we can see that the number of polygons right now is about 10K, so 10,000. And I think that's a good number of polygons. We can also use total plus selected object. So if we want to investigate object by object, we can go and select and see. So we can now do another import. I'm going to select the same exact file as before. I'm not going to convert into mesh, so I don't have the option to change the resolution. I'm gonna change the up axis so to be oriented correctly. Let's say epsilon up and say OK. And it's gonna tell me if I want to rename or skip these objects. I'm gonna rename them all because these are the same objects that we already imported, so there is a conflict. So we don't want to override them, we just want to rename them. And now you can see the second object there, the second fryer. So if I move this aside a little bit, we can see that it's a little bit different. We are still in edge mode, in edge faces visualization, but we cannot see any mesh, we cannot see any face, because this is another type of object. It's not a polygonal object. So when we work in augmented reality with my AR Studio, we prefer to use polygons and meshes. So we will choose the first object. We just need to reorient it. And again, we can investigate more. For example, if I go inside the group and I want to investigate an object inside the group, I can go up here in the menus, in the group menu, and I can ungroup, or I can just open the group so that I can get inside and I can select the single parts of this product design object. So I will select, for example, this. I can move them also all around using the move tool. So if I select that and I want to discover more, I go into modify tab and see what this object is. And you can see it's called the body object, which is not actually a polygonal model, but it does have some editable features similar to polygonal modeling. So again, this depends on the software where you develop this. So perhaps if you choose a NURBS modeling, you will have objects that are similar to NURBS, etc., etc. Now, if I right click, I can convert this into editable mesh, or if I right click again, I can convert this also in editable polys. Right click, convert to editable poly, and now we can start to see the actual faces, which are triangles, and the actual segments. So this is not a parametric or another type of object, it's a mesh object. And that's what we need for the AR visualization and also for other applications to work. So we're going to go for the second object on the right, and we're going to delete this one. You can also close the group once you're finished. Just go into group and close. So we're going to work with this, but we need to adjust it a little bit. We need to rotate it. And sometimes it's difficult to rotate it. Just try to keep the correct axis. In this case, we want to rotate it around the X, which is the red and circle. And if we want to make this more precise, we can go down at the bottom. We can just type the value, which is 90 in this case. So we rotated the object 90 degrees. We can now move it with the move tool. And again, if we want to place it precisely in the origin of the world, we can set everything to 0. Now, since the pivot of this object is not on the bottom of the object, but in the middle, the object is going in the middle, which is not particularly good when we work in AR. So I'm going to switch into 4 views by clicking on the bottom right buttons, and then we have other buttons here to frame the object. So I'm going to go close enough to push this up and make it, stand on the plane, on the bottom grid. And then I can switch from 4 views to maximize. And I want to go in the 3D viewport. Let's deactivate the edges faces again so we can see if everything goes well in terms of curviness of the object or smoothness. Don't deactivate the smoothness on the object because we will need that. And here again, we can open the group and go inside so we can start to work also with some materials. Now, there are a couple of ways you can apply materials. You can apply it by selecting the object or just dragging and dropping. So click on the material button, change from the slate material editor into the compact material editor. And now we can see we have many spheres that represent our standard materials. So these are called physical materials, and these are intended to be used as physically based render materials, PBR materials. So we can use this, but in 3D Studio Max, we also find other types of materials. Now this is a blank sphere. So we either select the object and then click on assign the material to the object, and then let's give it a color, or let's change something so we can see the difference. So I want to make this white and click on apply assign, and you can see that now it's become wider. And I can start to play with the metalness if I want to make it more shiny, more metallic. There you go. And with the roughness. So the roughness is the opposite of glossiness. So basically, if I increase the glossiness, I decrease the roughness, and all the way around. Glossiness is the glossy part of the material. And I can also click and drag a sphere onto another sphere if I want to duplicate that. And I activate the background to see a little bit better the reflections. And let's make this black so we can change the color. So we can start with a material, then we can copy it, and we can modify just little parts of that. The other method is just to click and drag the material onto the parts of the objects that we want to apply it to. Now, it's better to use roughness rather than glossiness, because PBR materials use usually roughness, material metalness, and the material diffuse or base color. So these are the three more important. Then we have also other maps, but we're gonna just play a little bit with these three right now. Now, if you want, you can continue to apply other materials, and also you can use a list of presets here in 3ds Max. So you can just click on the drop-down menu here and try out these different materials. Some of these contains procedural maps or textures, so we can use like more advanced effects on the materials. We can also create our own material, of course, in 3ds Max, but let's stick for these presets for now. And then if we go down here, we see all the other maps. So right now we are using a map. And also this one here is called stained copper. We can also customize it, change the color, change the values in the roughness, in the metalness. And also we can apply textures, apply more procedural maps. So we can play around and create our customized effects with the various maps and channels here. Now, another thing I want to do, first I'm going to apply this to the other parts of the material. So this will contain some textures that we can check in AR. And then I want to show you here that you have other options here. In 3ds Max, you have different types of materials. You have Arnold materials, you have specific materials, and probably not all of them will work in AR. So try to experiment and see if they work. So I'm gonna go back in the object here, right click, and I wanna go in the object properties. Here is where I can see the measurements. So I can see the height, the width of the generic space occupied by the object. Make sure that the object is not too small or not too big. You can resize it. I'm gonna resize it a little bit because it looked too small. And also another technique I use is just drag a box around the object, because when you're checking the properties, that those measurements, that size, it's representing kind of a group box around the object. So we can check the measures there. Also, you need to activate, of course, the units in centimeters in 3ds Max if you want to be pretty precise. So if I now make this a little bit bigger, so you can change also from down here the size. So let's make it like 250, which means I'm increasing this object size 2.5 times. And also I change the pivot position again. So I need to reposition that on top of the floor. because that's going to be needed when I'm going to place the object in the augmented reality visualization on a real table or on a real floor. So make sure that stays there on the floor. Again, we can create a box quickly and check if the measures are roughly okay. Otherwise, we need to get the real measures, and this takes a little bit more time. So I want to make sure that the object is big enough to look realistic in the augmented reality visualization. Let's go to File, Export, and now this is the part where we're going to move and bring the selected object with us into the MyR application. Now we need to select as the format, the GL transmission format, and we want that to be GLB. We give a name to this, we can call it anything we want, and let's save. Now in this little window, we want to make sure we are in the GL mode and not FBX, that we are exporting the selection or the whole scene if you want, that we have a name, that we have a directory, and then we have this checkbox on, which is to export in GLB and not in GLTF. And then in the materials, we're going to use baked materials. Let's open up my AR Studio website and let's get into our space, and let's click here in the product space on the plus to upload our model. We can either drag and drop the file directly, or we can click and navigate into the folder where we save our object. So I'm gonna go and navigate where I exported my GLB, which is this one right here. We can also preview it, and let's open it. And there you go. It's pretty quick because the object wasn't too heavy and we didn't use too many polygons. So now we can also check the materials in the material tab. We can check the various channels. If you're using textures or if you're using just a simple color, we can tell it from here. And we can see that there are no textures in here right now, even though we use a texture for a part of our object where we clicked. So there is something that it's missing. So let's go back in 3ds Max and let's see what it is. Now, when you create the model, and make sure it has have a mapping, that's also really important. So it's either the map that is not working or the mapping. So for the map, we can use textures rather than procedural maps, and this is something that is preferable than procedural maps. So to do that, we go in the selection here of the maps, and we're gonna look for the bitmap, click on there and select a texture to use. So I'm gonna apply now an actual pixel image rather than a procedural map in the roughness channel. And then I'm gonna try here some map also in the metalness. And also we can paste it in here. So you can see now the actual texture in the viewport. So we do have a texture right now. Now the other thing we can do is when we export. So I'm just gonna override. Instead of using baked material, use original materials. And let's now export and see if we fix the issue. So let's go back. You can see now if I zoom a little bit, we can start to see some textures. So this is not a perfect metal. It does have some stains and some defects. And we can tell that there is a texture. Again, if we go in the material panel, we can see the texture right here. So now we successfully exported the texture. And also we can apply the texture directly here. We can upload using the image button. Now, if that doesn't work, make sure that also the mapping is correct. So we can use basic mapping here in 3ds Max, like UV map, or something more complex like umwrap UVW. That's suggested if, again, you cannot see the texture. Otherwise, you can use some simpler mapping tool like the map scaler. and we can scale up or down the size of the texture. Sometimes the texture could be too big or too small to be seen, so make sure it has a size that is good. And also the object, let's check the size of the object. You can also click and activate the visualization of the size, and I think it's correct, or it's good. Otherwise I can change the scale also in here. Once we're ready, we can go in the camera icon, click on the little image icon and generate the poster. If we are not happy with the position, we can orbit a little bit and generate a new poster. And again, when we're finished, we can just publish it, which is kind of exporting. And we can now copy this link and share it with anyone, or we can also get an HTML code and put it in our website, or we can just scan our object and visualize it in my AR Studio app on a mobile device. Thank you for watching this video tutorial, and I remind you to subscribe to the channel so to stay updated and to follow on any news. And please check also our other videos for more information about my AR Studio.